Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage and family therapist. We are here this week with I don't know if it's a special episode. We're doing a Q&A. Thanks, interwebs, to lovely people who traverse the wilds of the internet. This is episode 99. I don't understand how or why. The podcast here was a complex solution to a relatively simple problem, which is that I don't like networking. And so a complicated solution to it's weird to email people out of the blue and ask if they want to meet. I did that by asking them if they wanted to meet and record our conversation. And here I am 98 episodes later. And we're doing a Q&A because I don't need to schedule a guest then. And because I think there are things that as a mental health provider, because it's my day job and I do it all the time and don't really think about it. Not that I don't think about it, but like there are aspects of it that become so routine, and that'd be good to put it out to the socials and various places where people can ask questions. And I have made a list of questions, and I've pulled some questions from other social media stuff with other therapists, Reddit Q&As or AMAs with therapists and stuff. So got a little bit of a list of questions for mental health providers that I'm going to work through. And hopefully it's interesting. And I like these things because I like to talk about mental health. And it is a passion of mine. And again, because you do it every day, you sort of like, I don't know, can get lost in like some of the things that might be interesting or relevant for other people. So yeah. And then next week, I have a special edition for episode 100 lined up, which I'm excited about. So here we go. Q&A. Let's hit it. How do I know if I need therapy or if I'm just being dramatic? Everybody needs therapy is the short answer. Yeah, I mean, having a trained professional who has extensively studied a topic and ideally has a great deal of experience working in that topic, make a helpful approach for you and your life is awesome, right? Like that sounds lovely. Take a coach, take a mentor, take a expert, quote unquote, a very extensively trained human on a topic, and they get to just meet with you and talk about how all the things they know and experience and have read research on and studied and experienced themselves. What does that look like for you personally? Love it. That sounds great. And that's what therapy is. So it doesn't matter if you're being dramatic or not. Therapy is helpful for everyone. I think everyone would benefit from therapy. I don't think everyone needs to be in therapy all the time. I think if we're struggling with pretty much anything, there's probably a specialist out there. There's probably a therapist who can help you in some way, shape, or form. You don't need to justify having a good reason to go to therapy. That being said, even this question implies like, hey, a therapist could probably help with this. Am I being too dramatic? What does that mean? Was too dramatic according to you, according to your mom, according to your significant other? Who gets to decide that? And therapy can help sort of untangle some of those existential questions and get you to a point where like you're maybe not second guessing so much, or you feel like you have a good decision-making tree on how to answer that question yourself. And yeah, it can be really, when done well, I think really empowering thing that helps people across the board. Great question. Why do I feel worse after therapy sometimes? Yeah. Well, a couple reasons. I think first and foremost, I say this in my informed consent for people when they're starting therapy. Informed consent is sort of this conversation we have before we jump into things, just so we're all on the same page and know what we're getting into. And as a licensed marriage and family therapist, I say this mostly to my couples, but that it's not unusual that things get better before they get worse. When you start working on something, sometimes you have to take it apart a little bit, right? A small example, for like vacuum cleaners, not new fancy ones. I'm dating myself here with my vacuum cleaner. But stand-up vacuum cleaners, they have like a band that sort of like goes around and whatever. It comes off sometimes, right? And so if you're using your stand-up vacuum on a carpet, maybe this band is like not even the right word. It is a band, but I'm sure there's like an engineering term for it. Anyway, you have to like take the vacuum cleaner a little bit apart to get the band put back on, and then put it back together, and then it works again. I have long hair, and so does my partner, and my children's hair is kind of long, and we have dogs, and our basement is carpeted, so we have to like set that setting for like, it's not like shag carpeting, but you know, whatever. And so this band on the vacuum cleaner comes off every once in a while, and so you have to unscrew the bottom of the vacuum cleaner, take a piece off, and then put the band back on, so like the wheel, or the like, I don't know, the brush, the comb sort of part of the vacuum cleaner can rotate, and you gotta like untangle it, whatever. In my case, usually cut human hair off of it. And then it's gross. I hate it. This is a task that I detest. And it's good to have a clean basement, because I don't like spiders more than I dislike human hair that's not connected to a body, which I dislike a lot. That's just how much I dislike spiders. Anyway, you have to take the vacuum cleaner apart more to fix it before it works again. So I think sometimes, especially with mental health in general, but definitely with couples, there's some structures, there's some bad habits that they get into, there's some behaviors that they've learned over time that are unhelpful, and you sort of have to take those apart before you can put it back together in a way that works again. So sometimes things get worse before they get better, because that's just part of the process of fixing something. Sometimes it's just a part of healing. When you have a broken bone, we need to set that bone. That might be very painful. That might be deeply unpleasant, and that helps the healing process. And I think therapy also can be make you feel worse, not just because of that structural piece, but also like, therapy's hard. Working on emotional stuff, dealing with trauma, unpacking old stuff, trying to train your brain to respond to things differently, to process things differently, to reprocess old stuff. Like, that is energy that requires resources and effort. So therapy can be really tiring, especially when I'm doing trauma work with folks. I sort of let them know, like, hey, you're gonna be tired later today. Like, pencil in an early bedtime. Make sure we hydrate. Maybe take a nap. You know, put on your comfort shows this afternoon. Like, don't go hard after something. Don't get out of therapy when we're processing trauma from your childhood and like call your mom. Like, nah, unless your mom's not related to the trauma and she's really lovely. But like, so oftentimes I tell people like to rest and recover, especially with that heavy like trauma type work. It's exhausting. It requires resources in the same way that, you know, running a 10K requires resources from your physical body. Our brain is part of our physical body too. Mental health isn't drawing from different resources. It's the same number of resources that our brain has. So I think it's tiring. It can be exhausting. It can be painful. I've been working with some folks around rejection sensitivity dysphoria and how that interplays with neurodivergence. And I think, again, like sometimes our brain is wired in such a way where like emotional pain gets wired as physical pain. Our brain interprets an emotional threat as a physical threat to our safety. So there's a lot of quirks that go into mental health. The brain is one of the most complex machines we're aware of. We keep trying to replicate it, right? So yeah, that's why the idea of therapy is that stuff does get better. You know, if you go to therapy every single week and feel bad after or feel worse after, that's a good thing to process with your therapist. Your therapist might be aware. Maybe you're new in therapy, or maybe you've recently started working on something different that's very difficult. And so they should be able to sort of process that with you and ideally have some sort of game plan. Again, like we're not doing lobotomies with an ice pick and like just sort of like shrugging and like hope this works. Therapists, again, have a lot of training. They have a philosophical background, mostly. Good therapists should. To why they're doing what they're doing, how it works, what school of thought they're coming from. And there's an idea, there's a rough outline. It's really hard to predict what therapy is going to look like for any one particular person, but there's a blueprint for what it can look like. So I think having that conversation with your therapist is really great. I don't like this question. Is it normal to trauma bond with your therapist? That's not what trauma bond means. Is why I don't like this question. This is one of those like cultural zeitgeist, like it means something different in pop psychology than it means to us professionals. A trauma bond is formed in high crisis situations, or repeated patterns over and over again. So therapy ideally is a safe space. It might be a challenging space, but it's a safe space, and you might be working through trauma, but ideally therapy is not in and of itself traumatizing. Maybe triggering, maybe, but like we try and be careful with that. We try not to re-traumatize people. Like that's a big goal of not doing harm. So I think it's not a trauma bond. Is it normal to bond with your therapist? Yeah, absolutely. The one common point of successful therapy across all different types of therapy with all different types of people is the therapeutic relationship that clients can relate to and form some sort of working relationship with their therapist. Somebody who like has your best interest at heart and is like invested in you doing well. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't need it doesn't need the extra level of like a trauma bond. You're not surviving a bank heist together where you've been taken hostage. You're not going to war together. This is another human who sees you as a fellow human and wants to be helpful. It's normal to bond with them. We don't need to make it pop psych nonsense. Do we have to be careful of what that bond looks like? Yeah. And I'm going to say that's a lot of the therapist's responsibility. Again, we are trained in how to work with that and be aware of and work with and work through transference, which is a fancy word for like our clients feel feelings about us. And like sometimes that's good feelings, sometimes it's bad feelings, whatever. Sometimes that's we're representing the authority, or we're representing their parent or their sibling or whatever. So sometimes that's the thing we have to work with and work through. Sometimes it's just like, you're a cool human. I bet we'd be friends outside therapy. And maybe, I think a lot of my clients think very highly of me and assume we'd be friends outside of therapy. And I show up pretty authentically in therapy. So I think at this point in my career, that's probably true, in the sense that the people who want to work with me are generally self-selecting, like they're good fits for who I want to work with. Early in my career, like, nah, like I'm just helpful, right? Like you want to stay married and I'm helping you salvage your marriage. Like the fact that you feel some sort of positive way towards me is not a surprise. That doesn't mean we're buds. So, yeah, it's normal to form a bond with your therapist. Arguably, that is helpful, and there's a range in which that is healthy, and there's some ranges where that becomes unhealthy, and we have to sort of be aware of it. But what if I think my therapist is judging me? It's a podcast, so you can't see it, but I shrugged. So that's not a helpful response. We aren't. We're probably objectively judging the people in your life that you talk to us about. We think your parents should have or could have done better. We think your coworker is an asshat. We think your boss is misogynistic, like whatever. When you come in and tell us about the stuff that's going on in your life, we are holding space specifically to help you. And so we're probably going to be more judgy in a way that is like protective of you, but isn't like parentifying ourselves and making you that child, or like always in your corner necessarily, no matter what. Again, we're not your friends. We're going to look at things objectively and try to be helpful. We do want to have your best interest in mind, but we're not like therapy is different than a friendship in that like we can say some stuff that might hurt your feelings or might challenge you or push you. You might not like to hear because we don't have to worry about being friends at the end of therapy. We don't have to maintain that relationship. So, yeah, I don't know. And like, I've seen some clients do some questionable things. I've had thoughts about getting back together with the ex. I've had thoughts about that piercing or that tattoo. And again, some of those are like, fuck yeah, that's awesome. Some others are like, I really hope that works out well for you. And so it's not so much judging as like, I don't know that that's the decision I would have recommended to you had you asked. But again, like good therapy isn't that we're trying to live your lives for you or that you have to check everything with us. So I had a client once who I said like, hey, this is toxic. We should be looking at divorce. And I worked on some boundaries for what that could look like with the divorce. And they ignored what I said. And they helped each other move into their new place. And they end up getting together outside of my help with therapy. It was like, who helps the person move who's divorcing them? And like, that was because they ignored my advice on boundaries. They got back together. So that's like my one example in like 16 years of doing therapy where somebody out and out ignoring what I said worked out better for them. And it's not like I'm always right. It's just saying like that's a rare occurrence. And the reason I can pull that example so readily is because like it's the one that exists as like a clear-cut example like that. Not saying what your therapist does is always right. It's not. It's a process of making sense of things and why it works. But yeah. We're not judging you in the way that other people out and about in your day-to-day life or out in the real world are judging you. It's different. Okay, I got a couple questions about religious trauma. Hey, ex-religious folks. How do I stop feeling guilty for leaving my faith? That's a really great question, and that's a big question. I could do a whole podcast about that. The guilt that we feel is a conditioned response around black and white thinking, dogmatic thinking, right and wrong thinking. A lot of religion is based around a control model in which there is a problem and the church, the religion, the religious leaders, whatever, is the solution. And so you're breaking the dynamic, you're breaking that sort of social contract that almost exists, that religion relies on working. You need to feel like you are sinful. You need to feel like you need a savior. You need to feel like you need to repent, whatever. You need to do more good things to earn that next level of spiritual awakening and nirvana or whatever, there's always something that you need to be doing when you sort of say like, nah, I'm good. Peace out. Dogmatic doctrine. You're just sort of saying like, no, that's not true. And so while I am somebody who is atheist, like I don't, that's not where everybody lands. So it's not so much like that's right. Although I would say like, yes, that's probably a correct stance. That is a logical place to land, is what I will say. And that guilt is that conditioned response. Again, religion requires there to be a right and a wrong, or like a better option. And if you're not picking the religion's better option, then you are in some form or fashion transgressing. And that's something that you're taught to do. Like that response of like, oh no, I've done something wrong is a conditioned response. We are taught that. We learn it through the environment that we're in. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where I think it's a conditioned response. Yeah. Yeah. And there's some, I don't want to, there's sometimes guilt is a helpful emotion in the sense that we've done something that goes against our ethics. We have lied to our partner. We have betrayed someone's confidence. We have done something to a friend or a family member that isn't in alignment with our value system. Guilt can be like helpful. What is unhelpful is shame. Shame's really like that self-defeating thing. It's like a dog tucking its tail between its legs and going off to hide in the corner. Like, it doesn't accomplish anything. It just makes you feel bad, and then you don't learn or grow, and you end up sort of perpetuating the same cycle. So guilt can be a helpful marker. So I'm sort of shifting this question to say, how do I stop feeling shame? Like, well, shame's unhelpful. Guilt is like, we do have to sort of interrogate, okay, this emotion is going off in me. I'm feeling a thing. What is that thing telling me? What is this signaling? If we look at emotions as like, all emotions are neutral, they're neither good nor bad in themselves. They're just signals of something, or our brain is responding to some sort of stimuli. What is it signaling? Well, I feel guilty about leaving the church, but the church taught me that like I'm sinful and need Jesus to be my savior, but I don't believe that Jesus existed, and I don't believe that sin is anything other than a man-made construct. So feeling guilty about leaving something that I don't believe in anymore, well, that doesn't make any sense. So we can sort of interrogate that guilt process and see what it's based on. And then it's learning some regulation techniques and some self-soothing. I'm personally a big fan of DBT work for that stuff. I just think it travels really well. Not to besmirch, and I've besmirched it before, so I don't know, I'm adding a caveat, but like, you know, you go to EMDR, you go see your EMDR therapist, and they're great for trauma, but like you can't pull out that setup, right? Like, I get that EMDR therapy, the goal is not that you have to do EMDR for the rest of your life, but like, where DBT is just like, it's breath work, it's using our senses to ground, it's using body-based stuff because our body is always with us. It travels really well wherever we're going. We're taking our body with us. And so it's using some of our brain, and it's using a lot of our body to be able to regulate our system, to self-soothe, to gather resources. So if that guilt is not signaling anything other than we've been conditioned to feel that guilt, then we learn how to like regulate and self-soothe. And that diminishes over time then. So we can progressively grow from there, so that we're not having to deal with that stuff all the time. Is questioning my faith the same as losing it? How fundamentalist were you raised? You know, no. And, you know, I have a brother-in-law who's a pastor, and when I was started in my deconstruction, he was angsty about the questions I was asking regarding what I've been taught in my religion, which seemed very odd to me because I was raised evangelical Lutheran, and you know, I was a pretty big proponent of Paul's work when I was back as a Christian, and like I'm not anymore, obviously, neither a proponent of Paul's work or a Christian, but you know, Paul says to test the spirits. Paul says to compare what we're hearing preachers say to what the scriptures say. Like we're supposed to do that. We are supposed to question. We are supposed to engage with the topic. And I would tend to lean towards that's good and healthy, not because Paul said so, but because like interrogating our beliefs is an important process that leads to growth. That if we are aligned with our beliefs, like that leads to more affirmation and more self-confidence around those things. So interrogating isn't always a path to unbelief. It is sometimes a path to strengthening things. So yeah, questioning your faith is great. Questioning your faith in, pick a noun, is great. We should pick up some rocks and turn them over in our lives and look at what's underneath them. And I think that's great. That's a gardening metaphor. I skipped some steps in explaining it. How do I deal with still loving people who are in toxic religious spaces? Great question. You know, I don't want to punt in this question in an Q&A episode, but how do I deal with still loving people who are in toxic? It's such a case-by-case basis. It's really hard to give like a blanket answer to that. I think if they are respectful of you as a person, if they are respectful of your belief systems, then like more power to it. You know, I ascribe to that concept of chosen family, that the people who are family are not necessarily who we're biologically related to, but family is who treats us how we want to be treated. Family is who shows up family is who treats us like we want family to treat us, however we define that, you know. So um yeah, there'll be people who show up for you and maintain that relationship, and like that's great, and like we can invest in those relationships, and relationships that are build us up. Great, even if we have different belief systems. Let's continue to put energy in that, because it's a edifying thing. It's an uplifting thing. If their toxicity spills over into a toxic dynamic in your relationship, where they're either trying to proselytize or reconvert you, or you're trying to, you know, save them from the toxic space they're in. I don't know. I don't love that. I'm I grew up evangelical, where you're taught that like you're responsible for everybody else's soul. You have to save other people. Um, and that's just colonization, right? Like that's deeply disrespectful to other people's autonomy. And so I'm wary of like, even if I think I'm correct in my belief systems, I'm wary about trying to get other people to join. I hold space for like, you know, community building and like mutual love and respect. More power to it. Like I go out of my way to find people who do have values and beliefs that are aligned with mine. I think that's helpful. I think we require community to be healthy, and I think we heal in community. So but that's finding people who are there already, or who are doing their work to get there, or who have been there already and are waiting for me to join them, or whatever, you know, whatever that looks like. I'm not some wise old man on top of the mountain. My journey continues as well, but that's different than trying to like get someone to be there, or force them, or pull them with you, or rescue them, or save them. You know, I think a lot of evangelical folks, especially evangelicals, leave the church and then like bring the colonizing, bring the evangelical, the proselytizing structures with them into atheism or Wicca or wherever they land, that they're still trying to like convert other people. And I'm just deeply skeptical of that. I don't think that's a respectful behavior. I don't think that's a way to treat another human that you're respectful of. So a bit of a punt. It's a case by case basis. It really does depend on some of the surrounding circumstances of that relationship. Yeah, we got some questions on the neurodivergent side of things. I work with religious trauma, I work with neurodivergence, and I'm a relationship therapist. So let's look at can you be autistic and outgoing? Yeah, absolutely. Some questions about burnout. What's the difference between ADHD and burnout? Like, I don't understand that question. Those are not the same thing. So I'm confused as to how somebody gets to a point where they think they're the same thing and are like wondering what the difference is. Like they're just different things. What's the difference between a pig and a horse? Like a lot. They're two different animals. Sometimes they're on farms together. I don't know. Like, do ADHD people get burned out? Yeah, absolutely. At probably a higher rate than everyone else. Not everyone else, than people who don't have ADHD. I don't know. That's not even true, right? Like, and just so at this point in my career, I'm so skeptical of the idea of neurotypical, that there is some group of people out there who's just like got the right wiring. Nah, I don't believe in that. So does dealing with ADHD have a correlation to feeling burnt out? Yes, we exist in a society that was not designed with neurodivergent folks in mind. And ADHD shows up differently for different people. So I was pretty miserable throughout my schooling years, having undiagnosed ADHD, and I got really good grades and did really well. You know, there are people whose ADHD shows up in a way where they're not able to be successful and work their way through it. So, you know, that burnout might look like a kid dropping out from school, or like failing a class or whatever. And the burnout for me was like, you know, being emotionally dysregulated a lot, being really like normal teenage angsty, but also then like undiagnosed ADHD, and not understanding why I like was so upset about being boxed in the various ways I was boxed in at that point in my life. Why life was pretty good, and yet I had this strong like middle finger to the law streak. So yeah, I don't I don't know that I understand that question. What's the difference between ADHD and burnout? There's a correlation, but they're different things. Lots of people who don't have ADHD also experience burnout. Late stage capitalism promotes a perpetual state of burnout so that we don't have time to think about how the system could be better or organize to tear the system down. Can you be autistic and outgoing? Yeah, this is a thing that I talk about a lot. This is the thing I talk about a lot with ADHD. Just as a for instance, for people who are new to their diagnosis to understand like the wide range of variants. Sorry, I just feel like I've got like a frog in my throat. Some Red Bull will help. It gives you wings and clears your throat. Can you be autistic and outgoing? Yeah, so when people are new to a diagnosis with ADHD, one of the things that I talk about a lot is the difference between just somebody who has ADHD who's an introvert and somebody who's ADHD and is an extrovert looks very different. And we sort of have this idea, I would say through the 90s and early 2000s, the idea of what ADHD was and how it's diagnosed was very much built on like an extroverted model of it. It's a hyperactive boy is what we sort of diagnosed and what our model of hyperactive ADHD looked like. And that's not true. I'm very much an introvert. I am restored by alone time. I'm restored by ideas, not people. People are tiring. And so looking at like introversion and extroversion as like, how do you recharge your batteries? What fills you up? People fill up extroverts, and alone time. But often, like, again, it's not being alone fills you up. It's what you're doing when you're by yourself that fills you up. It's ideas, it's thoughts, it's books, it's music, whatever. You know, introverts aren't just like in love with ourselves, and that's why we like to be alone. We're usually doing something. Our brain is doing something else other than engaging in a relationship with another human. So, and the flip of that, I think, is autistic is like, people with autism are socially awkward and therefore must be introverted. And that's not true at all. That is the case for some folks on the spectrum, but other folks on the spectrum are deeply extroverted and require a lot. They might plow through social norms. They might be the life of the party because they're so captivating and engaging because they don't pick up on all the social cues or because they don't care about the social norms. So, yeah, I don't know that it's been studied at length, but I would hazard that there is not a strong correlation between extroversion or introversion and neurodivergence. I would hazard a guess that, an educated guess, that any correlation that exists is sort of that environmentally people have learned the feedback loop that exists for not following social cues, not following social norms, not hitting your social cues, is to lean more introverted because it becomes so taxing to be social and neurodivergent. But I think they're unrelated. I think lots of extroverted folks are on the spectrum. Lots of folks on the autism spectrum are just naturally extroverts, and it looks different. That's why our diagnostic criteria have taken so long to catch up, because just the variability of neurodivergence is really high. And that's just looking at one criteria, right? Like neurodivergent, extrovert or introvert looks a lot different. And so, yeah, getting criteria that catch up to that variance is very complicated. And we only studied white men for a while, and white men were the only people who were diagnosing for a while. So we got some catch up to do. Do I need a diagnosis to claim the label? I'm a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to self-diagnosis. I think I'm deeply, deeply aware, because I swim in this water every day, that we do not have enough professionals to diagnose the people who are curious about a diagnosis. We just don't. There are not enough professionals. That's America for sure, because we just don't have enough mental health professionals anyway. But even like knowing and coordinating with people who are in other countries, I know some lovely folks in Ireland, some lovely folks in the UK who work with neurodivergence and like pretty high up in their healthcare systems, in the government healthcare systems, because that's how countries that are functional do healthcare. that it is worthwhile for a government to have a healthy populace. So the government does healthcare, not for profit. But, you know, this is a separate soapbox. But even, you know, in some of those other countries that don't have the hangups of American healthcare, there aren't enough professionals who are well trained in diagnosing something like this. And like I've seen a lot of like people go spend thousands of dollars on their big fancy diagnosis, and it's just like a wanking motion to it. Like it's rudimentary, or it's like real fucking basic stuff. Often for me, the difference is like when it's done by somebody who wasn't neurodivergent, who's just like following their textbook and they don't really know what it's like. They don't have that lived experience. So, you know, but I also see the people who come in and say, hey, Jer, I'm new to therapy. Thanks for having me. I've been watching a lot of TikTok. I think I'm autistic. Well, I'm skeptical of that self-diagnosis because there's research that says as much as 80% of the autism information on TikTok is wrong. So, you know, I look at a lot of factors when I'm doing diagnosis. Diagnosis is somewhat diagnostic criteria, but then it is also the clinical interview. So I think there's a middle ground here where you don't need an official diagnosis to identify that way. You know yourself better than any professional can ever hope to. And just because you like chicken nuggets doesn't mean you're autistic. So, you know, and it's just a for instance, it's a big one on the internet of like chicken nuggies and autism. And again, a lot of these things, I've talked about this elsewhere, like there's a kernel of truth in what the internet then takes and amplifies. Like a lot of people who have sensory issues related to neurodivergence have a very specific palate and will eat the same thing over and over again. If you're on the spectrum, that might be a number of foods that are okay, texture, taste, whatever, and you eat them over and over and over again in perpetuity. And if you're more on the ADHD side of things, you might eat the same thing over and over and over again for 3 months to 18 months to whatever, and then one day you just never want to touch it again, and it actually grosses you out. So again, like there's that piece of like, sure, people on the spectrum will often have some like food quirks, and having food quirks doesn't necessarily mean you're autistic, and having autism, being on the spectrum, does not mean that you have food quirks. Like there's variability here. So I like for people to do real assessments, take screeners that have been scientifically validated. Embrace Autism is a great website that has free scientifically validated screeners and assessments on them. Do I think you should go through those things with a licensed professional who has some expertise in this area? Yeah. Like I got openings right now, but also, you know, lots of people who specialize in this stuff are full and have a wait list. So I get that it's not accessible for everybody to get an official diagnosis. But there's a middle ground to like watching a lot of TikTok and self-diagnosing, or being like, I have some awkwardness, I must be autistic. Like, I don't know, that almost veers like paradoxically into ableism when we distill it down like that. It's unhelpful. It becomes unhelpful, and it can retroactively get in the way of people who are bad faith actors, like many of our politicians are, who want to take away accessibility for folks, who want to take away accountability. Taking away DEI has been like the big thing here in the current administration here in the US, and that harms people who have accessibility issues because they're differently abled. Like the Americans Disability Act is really important and was passed in 1994. That's not that long ago that we were like not making sure differently abled people could get into buildings or had bathrooms that they could use. Like, what the fuck are we doing? So too many people self-diagnosing inaccurately harms the people who do need those resources, because there becomes like a pendulum swing or a response from other people to say, well, no, I'm not going to do that accessibility piece because it's bullshit. So long-winded answer. Do I need a diagnosis to claim the label was the question. No. And you should do more than just watch TikTok or listen to podcasts or whatever. You know, I'm not picking on TikTok. There is research that suggests TikTok particularly is very bad with their autism information. So this is a great question that makes me feel miserable. Why do therapists charge so much if they want to help people? Yeah. I charge $160 an hour to my clients who are tuning in. Spoiler alert, that's going to have to go up soon. Um, you know, my therapist is 175 an hour. I think there's a range in there that is reasonable. As a provider myself, the amount of hours I spend with clients is around 15 a week. And that is a pretty strong boundary for me. I used to see like 26 people a week. I don't think I did as good a work then as I do now. 15 people is enough time to collaborate with other providers, to text clients in between sessions, to look up resources for them and get them sent out, to do super bills and other administrative things that I need to do on my client's behalf, to do credentialing, continuing ed, all the things that I need to do to keep my license. I have a podcast, I have a YouTube channel. Those are not requirements of being a therapist. I think those are more requirements of being a small business owner. I pay someone to do my social media. So like I have costs that I accrue. I have a lot of time that I spend that isn't face-to-face with clients that I don't get paid for. And I'm not saying I should get paid for the podcast. I'm just saying like a lot of that administrative stuff, a lot of my continuing ed stuff, like those things have costs for me. Not only am I not being paid for that time, I am having to pay stuff to do those things. So yeah, that gives me, that 160, 175 sort of rate puts me in a space where I can see 15 people a week and pay my bills. I'm married to a teacher, another profession that is not paid very well for the amount of work they have to do. And so, I think we, like most Americans, are one major health crisis away from not being financially okay. We're not traveling internationally, but we are capable of looking into doing that. We have small children, so traveling locally, visiting family, etc., tends to be more of what we're doing now. But taking a week off or 2 weeks, 2 weeks off vacation is not sustainable for me at this point. And I'm 16 years into my career. I couldn't swing that because when I don't see clients, I don't get paid. There's nothing else coming in, right? So if my wife were to take the summer off and not be working an 11 or 12-month contract, there's nothing coming in. So again, can I take time off? Yeah, and I do. I take long weekends. I don't work on Wednesdays ever. I'm recording on a Wednesday now. This is the second podcast I'm recording today, and I'll do a YouTube video too before I go pick up my kid from school. So that's quote unquote. I don't see clients on Wednesdays, which means I'm working without having money come in. But it's expensive to pay for all the stuff that we need to. So the cost of therapy is tied into how much bureaucratic bullshit and other stuff goes into running a therapy business. I think the people who are pushing $250, $300 a session, that's not a good deal. I don't think there's a therapist out there who is worth that. Sorry, fellow therapists. And if I had an inn in Hollywood and could charge $500 a session to see celebrity couples, hell yeah, sign me up. I don't know. It's late stage capitalism. I support people for getting paid. If you have an inn to get money that isn't harming other people, great, do that. So therapy is expensive, one, because late stage capitalism is expensive. There's a lot of costs that go into it. And two, we have an hourly rate because when we're seeing clients, it's the only time we get paid. And there's a lot of time and energy that goes into being a good therapist outside of that. Just regulating ourselves, taking care of ourselves, dealing with our own bullshit so that we don't bring it into your sessions. We have to do continuing ed, and most of the therapists that I know and are doing more training and continuing ed than they are required to by law, because they like to learn and they want to provide good service to their clients. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of costs behind the scenes that go into being a therapist. If you're seeing somebody private pay, that's that all encompassing hourly rate that they charge. If you're seeing somebody through insurance, like that is still there. It just gets filtered out. So the insurance company takes a cut, and then the agency that somebody is working at takes their cut, and to cover all those things that I just mentioned, like rent and marketing and billing and all that other stuff. So there's just a bunch of costs. Everything is expensive. Our office space rentals are expensive. Our electronic healthcare records are more expensive. The reason I will raise my rate is because everything I use on a daily basis to run my business has increased in price in the 3 years that I've been having my own practice. From simple credit card reader to the systems I use to run my calendar and send out reminders and all that stuff. So another question about judging. We're not judging you. We love you. We love our clients. We care deeply about them. Sometimes they do things that we wouldn't necessarily recommend. Why does self-care feel like bullshit? That's such a good question. Man, why does self-care feel like bullshit? It's not. And there are scammy people out there who do take advantage of like the wellness spaces and like, yeah, there's a range in which self-care is not bullshit and everyone needs it and is really great for you. And there's another range where it gets commodified or commercialized, and then it can turn into bullshit. And then when we have no self-care at all, and we're in that like hustle culture, we're in that grind mindset of like everything we need to do needs to be production based, and we need to be successful as society deems it. With 2.3 children and X number of dollars in the bank account and a side hustle and commercial real estate that we're subleasing and whatever passive income bullshit. Yeah, I don't know. The world's hard. It's stressful. A lot of that stress is contrived and policy choices that we could not do. The fact that there are starving children in the world is a moral failing of world leaders everywhere. That's a thing, because there's enough food produced in the world to feed everybody. Whoever's like pro hungry kid, fuck you. Whoever is thinking that children who can't pay for school lunch should be hungry, again, fuck you. I don't know, like, so self-care feels like bullshit, I think, because our system's so broken and we're trained that taking time for ourselves or investing in ourselves, in which we are not able to commodify that investment or get a clear, obvious return on investment, is somehow bad. The idea that we as humans are supposed to be in production mode all the time. Like, we're not. Even from a biological perspective, we're not. We rest often. We are required to, or we die. And what late stage capitalism has done, and into late stage capitalism has just bastardized that until squeezing out as much as I don't even want to say as possible, because like obviously people used to work like 14, 16 hour, 18-hour days in like a coal mine. Like, fuck that noise. And you know, the idea that countries can't be doing 4-day work weeks, like, no, there's a ton of research that says we can do that. We're just not. There's a ton of research that says kids should be in school way fewer hours and start later in the day so they can sleep in. So we're just in the system that is prepping us, that is training us, that is trying to desensitize us to not take care of ourselves so that someone else can make profit off of our work, our labor, our energy, our time. Yeah. So no, self-care is deeply, deeply important and lovely and great. And then if you veer so far into, you know, spending $1,000 to have some former military dude with a beard scream in your face about how you're a beta something, whatever slurs they use, because you like are a vegetarian or whatever. I don't fucking know. I don't get the masculinity grift. There are people who, yeah, commodify self-care to be spa days and $1,000 retreats where you do ayahuasca and body painting. I don't know. Like if those things are your jam and can be healing for you, that's great. But like, yeah, the bullshit becomes the commodification of it, not the activity itself. Self-care is really important. Most people I see in therapy are not doing enough of it, not because they're flawed humans, but because the system just does not allow for it. The system teaches us to not do that. Good question, though. How do I keep giving a shit when the world is on fire? Uh, the world's always been on fire. On the one hand, because of the internet, we're way more aware of the world being on fire in places that we are not. I don't know. That's what humans do. I don't love that answer when I say it out loud. I don't know. We keep showing up because there are people in our lives that matter, and those relationships matter. And we're self-aware mammals on a rock flying through space at 600,000 miles an hour. Like a lot of what we're doing is stupid. And a lot of what we do won't matter on a global scale. But like, yeah, that lens you have of like, there are 20 to 100 people in your life that are really matter, that you matter to, and they matter to you. And that's sort of like human beings at scale. And I think sort of the world's on fire is like, yeah, our nervous systems didn't evolve to know about all the stress and trauma everywhere in the world all the time. We're wired for 20 to 100 people, and being able to turn that off sometimes and just reset and regulate. And that's the part of the world being on fire, is like there are people who are profiting off of us being dysregulated all the time, humans being dysregulated all the time. So as an act of resistance, keep going, as an act of resistance to cultivate joy, to grow community, to make meaningful connections. That's what puts some of the fire out, at least in your local space. And then as you are well resourced and able, we try and put out larger fires. I mean, again, I just sort of talked about like how people used to work 18 hours a day, and like that's a thing we fought for. And I can be frustrated that there's a mountain of research that says a 4-day work week is great for people's mental health, and like we should be doing it. And then Arkansas is rolling back laws that protect children from having to work, like 14-year-olds from working, like there's a stupidity to it. And we have progressed overall as a society in a way that 150 years ago people wouldn't have thought was possible. So I don't know. I think progress on a global scale is really slow, and we're not wired for that global scale, even though it's available to us. That doesn't mean bury your head in the sand. That doesn't mean don't be informed. It just means like be aware that like regulating yourself and being in your local environment, touching grass literally in your local environment, grounding as in put your feet on the ground, matters. And the relationships we build matter. Every story we tell about our lives, about the human species, about existence, is about human connection. I'm a comic book nerd, so I'll go back to some comic books. Like Batman is a story about family. It's not about justice. It's not about fighting crime. It's about family. He loses his family, and then he builds a new one. It's Alfred and Robin and Nightwing and Oracle, and like those are the relationships that matter even after losing the rest of his family. Superman isn't truth, justice, in the American way. It's Lois Lane. It's Jimmy Olsen. It's Crypto the dog. I've been rereading some of Tom King's stuff before his next trade paperback of Wonder Woman comes out. I'm like, yeah, Supergirl. His run on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, is fantastic because it's such a personal story about Supergirl connecting with this one person throughout this entire galaxy, throughout this universe. This all-powerful being of Supergirl helps this one girl, and like I don't know, that's what matters. The people in your life matter, and you matter to them. And if you're like, nah, that's not true, well, maybe that's cognitive distortion in your brain. You should talk to a therapist about it, or you should get better chosen family, you know? And I don't say that like to wag my finger at you and say, shame on you, you should be doing better. Just to say like, yeah, like those connections matter. Let's invest in the ones that build us up. Ooh, I could have put this with the religious trauma ones. Is it okay to be angry at my family for the way I was raised? Yes, obviously. Um, and again, anger is neutral. I maintain that emotions are neutral. They are signals. They're neither good nor bad. They're signals of something. What is that anger signaling to us? And what do we want to do with it? Is it okay to be a dickhead to my family all the time for how they acted 20 years ago? I'm less likely to say yes to that, although I won't rule it out entirely. Yeah, I don't know. Anger is often a signal of some sort of injustice that has not been addressed. And some injustices are old and can't be addressed. Some things we can't go back and change. We don't have a time machine. You know, I still go back and forth. I have some pretty strong boundaries with my family of origin, certain members of family of origin, because of how I was raised. And they're still deeply religious, and I am not. So I don't know that some of that stuff's ever going to be addressed. So I have boundaries around it. But it's hard to hold that complexity. It's hard because it's not easy to just be mad at them, because they are well-intentioned people who were victimized by the same religious upbringing that I feel like I was. So, you know, they weren't doing it as like, it made me stronger, it'll make you stronger. They were doing it because they truly believed that it was the right thing to be doing. That doesn't mean it was. That doesn't mean I have to give them a pass. It's different than like they're bad people who are doing evil things. It's more complex than that. So yes, you absolutely can be angry at them, and that doesn't necessarily tell you what to do next. That's the process, the journey of like, yeah, what to do in response. And again, it's going to be such a case by case basis. It's going to vary a bit. Whew. So that's 15 questions. Good job, everybody. I love stuff like this, honestly. I love having guests on. The reason I don't always have guests on is never because there aren't guests to have on, and it's never because I love to hear myself talk. I would love to have guests on all the time and never be the center or the focal point or the main speaker. And it's honestly just that's how my ADHD shows up is scheduling things with people is a very taxing thing for me. So it's usually a scheduling thing, and or life happens, kids get sick, someone needs to reschedule, whatever. So sometimes the schedule has to change. So, but this is fun. Maybe we'll do another one sometime. I liked this. Good Q&A, everybody. Episode 99. How exciting. Episode 100 is recorded already. So I know it is great and fantastic, but that'll be next week, which is exciting. A little bit of a milestone. And yeah, I'm always open to feedback. This was a great way to interact with some people who wanted to talk and ask me questions about mental health. And yeah, we'll do it again. We'll get back to having guests on. I have ADHD. I like to have a lot of different things. I'm not somebody who's probably ever going to lock in one form of podcast only forever. So is what it is. Thanks for tuning in. You can find out more about my work. You can find my YouTube channel. You can find my website down in the show notes. We got merch. Pride Month is coming up, so we have some Pride themed merch that we designed last year, but it's still there. It's cool. Your therapist needs therapy in the rainbow logo. That's actually quite nifty. Shout out to Kenny, my media person, who makes all my stuff look and sound nice, and also does all my graphic design. They're awesome. One of my favorite humans. Yeah, and then like I don't know, leave reviews and stuff. I don't go on to Spotify or iTunes or a lot of that stuff, but apparently if you leave a review and like us, it helps people find us. So that's cool. If you're a multimillionaire and you want to just give me money to keep doing the podcast, I will also accept that. Capitalism, right? So yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Always open to suggestions for guests or other topics. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another new episode. That'll be really great. Peace out, everybody.